Welcome back. Good to have you with us. It's a Tuesday morning. It is 20 minutes away from 8 o'clock, and we're going to spend the next 20 minutes or so along with the Reserve Bank Governor, very busy man, just back over from the US, Lesetja Kganyago as well. And so many tweets, of course, which I will get to. I am seeing them. I'm not ignoring you. I promise I'll try and retweet them or something later to show you I'm paying attention. We'll get to some of them in a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. But we have to come back to you, Governor. You were saying something about the colour grey before we went to, well, during the ad break.
What were you saying about the colour grey?
Because I don't know if people know this side of you. I don't know if South Africans know this.
A very observant essay.
We want to talk about grey listing, and the Governor says, Governor.
This is where you come in.
I thought we were off air.
Yeah, we were off air, which is why we'd like to share what happened behind the scenes.
Apparently, I look... My
No,
dress
I
looks...
want the governor to say.
Oh, okay.
What was the question about the dress?
I thought she must ask the question about grey listing because it looks like her dress looks grey on TV.
There we go. That's what we get up to off
paying
air.
attention to our screen, but you're right, Governor. I want to talk about grey listing and get your opinion on it. I mean, what are your thoughts about the country being grey listed?
It's something that we have got to try and avoid at all costs and put our best effort to avoid the grey listing. The approach from the authorities had been that firstly, we must try and avoid it. And if we can't avoid it and we end up being grey listed, try and get out of the grey listing as quickly as possible. Why is it important for South Africa not to be grey listed? Of course, it could have been worse. We could have been blacklisted, in which case we wouldn't be able to be part of the global financial system.
We would have been in debt rescue as a country.
Right? But we are grey listed, which then says we could be grey listed, which says that there are deficiencies in our anti-money laundering system. And what we have actually seen through the report, amongst the things, was that South Africa is very good compiling information. The banks religiously, diligently submit suspicious transaction reports. And the question that is coming from the Financial Action Task Force is that once you have got these reports, you have filed so many of these reports, you have had the Financial Intelligence Center in South Africa since 2003, there has not been a single conviction of money laundering. So what are you doing with all of this, with all of these reports? And that is one. Of course, the other is that we need to get through to what are called beneficial owners. So if to the extent that there is a trust or some shelf company, you must know who is behind all of those, because if we do not know who is behind all of those, we do not know what they are up to. There's a range of other things, including lawyers having to report their clients in terms of the trust accounts that they are having and all of that stuff. I'm just saying to you, those are the deficiencies. Right. What would this mean then if we are grey listed? If we are grey listed, foreign financial institutions are going to have to do what is called enhanced due diligence on their South African customers and their South African financial counterparts. That means that they are going to have to spend more resources doing background check of the South African clients. And in so doing, they are going to be incurring costs. They are going to pass those costs back to the South Africans. And that is why South Africa must avoid it, because what you are going to have is that the cost of accessing international finance is going to rise.
Governor, I asked because you had an interview earlier, I think last week or so, with an analyst who said grey listing might be good.
It might be a good thing. And
might be a good thing.
The argument was, and I'm going to just paraphrase, the argument was as fiscally, as a country, because of all the fraud over the years, by being grey listed, that it wouldn't be a bad thing for South Africa because it would force us to relook at all the scenarios you spoke about now when it comes to money laundering and international arrangements when it comes to money being moved out the country and in the country. It would force us as a country to sit back and stop what is happening, as opposed to talking about it, about possible reforms as well. So there was one proponent saying grey listing, not a bad thing, because apparently we can't handle our money.
I wouldn't share that. the costs of the grey listing to the broader South African economy are not insignificant. And so, and we didn't have to wait for the threat of grey listing to act on these things. And maybe I should remind South Africans that it's only a couple of years ago that the National Treasury proposed amendments to the Financial Intelligence Center Act. And those amendments were passed by Parliament, and they lied at the union buildings not being signed. And it had to take a lot of pressure from South African business to say those amendments must go through. The situation could have been worse if we hadn't moved in that respect. And for the countries that have gone through the grey listing, Zimbabwe had gone through it, Mauritius have gone through it, there are a number of countries that have gone through it. It's not a nice experience. You're going to have to work hard to get out of that because we are so attuned with the global financial system. And in the case of South Africa, we have got our financial institutions with tentacles across the African continent. So we might say that, oh, no, it might be good because it will get us to do things. The truth of the matter is that the costs might be felt across the African continent because our banks are active on the African continent.
What's the sentiment when we use the word grey listing, like at the international summit you were just at now? Again, as we're learning, we're going along here, when it comes to the economy, it's all to do with the word sentiment. What does grey listing mean for international investors, and how do you pad that off down the leg side? But as you say, they know what it is. They know what they want to hear from you. What do you tell them when they say, Mr. Governor, what are you doing about grey listing?
Well, what we are telling them is that we are passing legislation to deal with the defects, and it's being fast-tracked going through Parliament now. Passing of the legislation is one thing. What needs to be seen is demonstrable progress in the implementation of that legislation, or demonstrable progress in dealing with the defects that had been identified. Some of the defects, by the way, did not require legislative changes, and those which do not require legislative changes, we should have just go ahead and implement those. It's very important. Investors know what it is. What they are asking is, are you prepared? Would you be able to get off the grey listing? Should you get off the grey listing? Because many of them would price the worst case scenario. Then the worst case scenario is that we would be grey listed. Our approach as the authorities is to work hard to avoid being grey listed. But in the event that we are grey listed, we would like to come off that grey listing as quickly as possible. And I think that some of the countries are able to come off the grey listing within 12-month period. And I think that South Africa, if we end up being grey listed, we should be able to come off that quickly.
And just, Governor, just speaking about being, part of a player in this, global system and the global economy, why is it so important to watch what America particularly is doing with interest rates? And do you think, perhaps in your answer, they should have more mercy on what they do into developed countries?
It's a question that was asked. I mean, the U.S. Central Bank, the Fed, have got a very difficult task. Their law says that they must keep inflation low, maximize employment, keep low, long-term interest rates low, maintain financial stability. Can you imagine if you add to that the well-being of the citizens of the world? It's almost going to be an impossible task for them. So people say these things, but the truth of the matter is that it is the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. So the steps that they take based on what they think is happening to the U.S. economy. Of course, they get concerned about what we call spillovers, what it means for the other countries. But if the U.S. fails to deal with inflation, then we are just going to be having global inflation continuing to rise, and developing countries are going to be in a worse position, not in a better position. And so what is coming through now is that the U.S., in dealing with inflation, they had to increase their interest rates. And as a result of them increasing their interest rates, the US dollar is becoming stronger. And with the US dollar becoming stronger, and this is actually very important because when you listen to news in South Africa, market news, it would be, oh, the rand has weakened by this, the rand has weakened. But the truth of the matter is that it's not the rand that is weakening at the moment, it is the dollar that is strengthening, and is strengthening across all the currencies, whether it is the euro, the British pound, the Australian dollar, or what. The dollar is strengthening across. And what's important here for countries is that the US, in reining in their inflation, says to us, we too have got to rein in the inflation, because failure to rein in the inflation could result in what we call a loss of competitiveness, in the sense that you will have inflation that would be higher than that of the US. You want your inflation to be either below or in line with that of the US, and in so doing, then you can become competitive. So the spillovers matter. The US monetary policy does have these effects, and sometimes one would have to turn around and
say... If I can just slot this question in, because we're talking about currency quickly, Governor. What is it about the kwacha? Because there's been a lot of conversations about the kwacha currency being stronger than the rand. What is it that they're doing right that we are doing wrong? So we can just get clarity on, because there's been a lot of debates on this.
Do you believe that story?
It's not a story.
It's not.
We need
can we
clarify this right here on the show. Please.
You mean the kwacha in Zambia?
It is the kwacha in Zambia.
Yeah.
It is a definite viral story that we need clarity on. Is it stronger than the rand?
Do you know what they did? They dropped 3 zeros from their currency. So if you want to know what the real value of the kwacha is, you must add 3 zeros to the currency that they are in. And I've seen this on social media.
It's viral.
People are falling for it. It's not just the kwacha, by the way. There was the South African delegation that was in Ghana, and they said the cedi is stronger than the rand. I said, but they dropped 4 zeros.
There you have it, South Africa.
So almost 1,000% you should actually add on.
Wow.
Good heavens. So that's the official take on what's happening with the kwacha as well. In the last couple of moments, because I just want to just end off, if we could, before we say goodbye, T, as well, to the Governor, is let's just kick the tin a little further down the road. Expectations, Governor, that we're going to have an increase again in November. I think it's November, some 25 basis points. And again, I think it's early next year. We're hearing between 50 and 75. When you talk about pain, this is going to hurt again. Can't Santa at the Reserve Bank give us a break?
I wish inflation could give us a break. You know, if only this inflation could give us a break, life would be so much better. But inflation is not going to give us a break because we are putting our hopes on the table. Hope is not a strategy. We're going to have to do something concrete to rein in inflation. And again, getting into the corona pandemic in 2020, the South African Reserve Bank was able to provide the support. We could cut interest rates. Why? Because inflation was contained. And so when I had heard these things of people having to pay 1,000 rands more on their mortgage, and I say, I feel that pain too. I feel that pain. It is painful. But doing nothing will lead to even bigger pain down the line, and we are going to have to do something. So November, what's going to happen in November? I am just one number. There are the other members who also must express their views, and that ends up being the decision of the MPC. But the important marker for South Africans to watch is when inflation declines and falls within the targets and moving towards the 4.5%. That's when interest rates begin.
And I'm sure many people would agree with you, and I don't want to use the word hope as we say goodbye, Governor, but so are we still on line? Do you think are the markers, the word you used, the markers there for 25 basis points in November?
We expect inflation next year to decline to 5.3, and in 2024 to decline towards the midpoint of our inflation target range. That is what you should be looking at if you want to know what happens to interest rates.
So, yes, I think is the answer. So more interest rates to bring the inflation down. And I think you've explained it so very nicely, Governor. I think we understand. We don't like it. We don't like it. Don't get us wrong. It hurts. but we understand why. Governor, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Lesetja Kganyago, the South African Reserve Bank Governor, talking to us this morning. And what a tough job. What a tough job. I mean, having to, of course, come to the country and do the best you can. Because, I mean, if you remember, the governor was once quoted as saying that I hear the cries of our people about the cost of living being unbearable. So having to bear that responsibility amongst your team to try and constantly hear the cry, try to do the best you can in a global context can be an easy feat. But we appreciate all the clarity you brought today on the show.